This is it, guys. These are the last retro games I'm going to include in the Year of Retro Gaming project, which has now been going on for over 3 years. It's finally time to say goodbye, and I'm done. But before I go, there's just a couple of games that I missed out on. Of course, in episode 67 I played Terranigma and claimed that this game was the Super Nintendo's swan song. That's not strictly speaking true. There were a number of games that came after it, most of them forgettable fluff, and mostly ignored in the face of the PlayStation and the Saturn and the upcoming Nintendo 64. Officially, the very last Super Nintendo game ever released in PAL was a Timon and Pumbaa minigame collection in March of '98. And then, 7 months later, there was one more piece of software made for the US, and it was Frogger. I'm not looking at either of them today because they're rubbish. How about I play something a bit pinker? First you draw a circle, then you dot the eyes, add a great big smile, and presto, it's Kirby! Okay, the big question. Why did Nintendo leave it so late in the Super NES's life cycle to call in Kirby? And why twice in 1 year? I have no inside scoop to back me up here, but I've got a theory, and here it is. Kirby has always been a very kid-friendly series. Everything's bright, colourful and adorable, and let's be honest here, the games are fun, but they're really easy. It's a perfect series for the littlies to play. By 1996 and 97, most older gamers had moved on to either the PlayStation or the Nintendo 64. Meanwhile, parents with no intention of buying a new console were still looking for new Super Nintendo games to give little Jimmy for Christmas. Enter Kirby. It makes sense, I suppose. The first game I'm looking at is Kirby's Fun Pack, also known as Superstar in America. Instead of running as a simple beginning to end kind of game, Fun Pack is actually split into 6 smaller games, and a couple of little mini-games. I initially found this very confusing, and I was wishing for it to be more straightforward. I mean, how was I supposed to know which one to choose first? Stress! Anyway, the game plays pretty much identically to Kirby's Adventure, see episode 28 for that one, with a few little tweaks here and there. One new addition is that if you're tired of a particular ability, instead of just tossing it away, you can turn it into an additional player. This is a really cool little feature that I made use of quite a lot. I would say for most of my time playing through the Fun Pack, I made sure I had a little helper fighting alongside me. And if you've got a friend or a sibling, they can control the second character too, which is a sweet little bonus. So the first game I jumped into was called Spring Breeze. This is actually a 16-bit remake of Kirby's Dreamland, like the original Game Boy game. But let's be honest, Dreamland was incredibly short, so as awesome as this is, and you can steal enemies' abilities this time, it doesn't last long. In fact, I just watched a speedrun that was about 4 minutes. Wow, I'm not that good. The second game I played is called Gourmet Race, which is literally that. You're racing King DDD through 3 levels, trying to reach the end before him, as well as eat more food. This one too is over really quickly. I'd like to stop for a minute just to have a little chat about King DDD. What the heck is up with this royal duck penguin type thing? I mean, he's obviously the main antagonist in the Kirby series along with Meta Knight, but he's never really that evil. He's no Bowser or Dr. Wily. While he's usually the big baddie you're constantly moving towards, most of the time he's just a scapegoat. He's either being controlled by some higher power or his actions are simply being misunderstood. In the cartoon series, he was shown to be a pretty pathetic goofball, so yeah, DDD, not that evil. He's a cool character in Smash Brothers though. Moving on. The next game in the Fun Pack is called Dynablade. It's pretty much another short start to finish game, this time featuring a big bird who has to be put back in her place. But this time, there's a map screen. For no real reason. The fourth one's called the Great Cave Offensive. This is quite a different beast. Instead of linear levels where Kirby just has to reach the end, this game is made up of a bunch of massive mazes, and Kirby's job is to find as much treasure as he can. There's 60 pieces of treasure hidden throughout the game. I didn't enjoy this one as much as the others. The levels are much bigger in size, and I just had this constant feeling that I was missing important items the whole way through. And turns out I was. Next up is Revenge of Meta Knight. This one sees Kirby go all-out offensive. Meta Knight's flying fortress, the Halberd, is a threat to Dreamland, so Kirby destroys it piece by piece. Yeah, you go, Puffball. What sets this one apart is, first of all, Kirby can hear dialogue between Meta Knight and all his lackeys. And secondly, there's also a time limit that's constantly counting down, so, can you save Dreamland in time? This little game is pretty exciting, and it's the most intense part of the collection. The last game is called Milky Way Wishes. This one is, again, quite different to the others, and it's also the longest and the trickiest to complete. The main thing to remember is that Kirby doesn't get abilities by eating enemies in this game, not at all. Once he finds a trophy with a particular ability, the umbrella for example, he gets that ability for the rest of the game, and he can switch it in or out whenever he wants. It's a neat little change in the formula. Overall, they made the enemies tougher in the Fun Pack than in previous Kirby games, whereas before anything could be killed with one hit from whatever power you happen to have. Now they take a bit more beating. Oh yeah, and there's also those couple of mini-games included in the Fun Pack too, but well, they're not going to occupy you for very long. You might see a couple of familiar faces in the audience though. Close to a year later, Kirby's Dreamland 3 was released. This is actually a sequel to the Game Boy Kirby's, not the NES game, and although its gameplay is, well, it's pretty much the same as the Fun Pack, there's a few noticeable differences. The first thing that sticks out is the visual style. The Kirby team must have taken inspiration from Yoshi's Island. Everything looks like it's been drawn with crayons. It's an interesting look, but they went for an odd pastel-y colour palette. It looks pretty stark compared to the Fun Pack. There's a new character called Gooey, and he basically takes the place of the copy ability in the Fun Pack. He can be summoned whenever you want for the cost of a couple of hit points. If you're playing solo, he'll be controlled by the computer, but if you've got a friend, they can control Gooey. Whereas I would always want a helper in the Fun Pack, in Dreamland 3 I found Gooey to be kind of annoying. I felt like I could play better without him, so I did. However, the big draw of this game is Kirby's 6 animal friends. There's a cat, an owl, a hamster, a fish, a bird, and this thing. What the heck is this? It's a pink blob with a bow, and it looks like it's sucking Kirby's brain out. The animals add a huge amount of customization to the game. As usual, Kirby can copy enemies' abilities by eating them, but each of these abilities also changes depending on which animal you're riding, so there's like a gazillion different variations to try out. One thing that I do like is that each level has a little mini puzzle that you have to solve if you want to get the special star for that level. None of these are particularly difficult to figure out. It might just be, watering a certain amount of flowers or something like that, but it does add a little bit of replayability if you get to the level's end and you haven't achieved the special goal. Apart from that, it's really just business as usual. There's Wispy Woods, etc, etc. Although, if you ever thought Wispy Woods looked too friendly to be an evil boss, check out this one. While this game is, mostly pretty bland and nothing that hasn't been in a previous Kirby game, there are occasional touches of creativity. I really liked this level where Kirby had to collect all the pieces of a robot to put a familiar face back together again. And that's not the only cameo in this game. I've got to admit, as gratuitous as it is, I still gave a little squeal of delight when Kirby found himself up against Metroids, and the only way to beat them was to use ice. Very nice, Nintendo, +1 respect points. And check out who gives him his reward once he's destroyed them all. Awesome. Dreamland 3 is a very good game, as good as any of the other Kirby's. But in gameplay terms, the only thing really setting this apart from the countless others is the addition of the animals. And as it's the 5th platform game in the series, it's all starting to seem a bit samey. So, both of these late Super Nintendo games were great when they first came out, and they're still great today. Ching! But, which one is better? I'm pretty sure most people would agree that Fun Pack, or Superstar, or whatever you want to call it, is the better game. And in a few ways, Dreamland 3 seems like a bit of a step backwards. Like, in Fun Pack, Kirby changes colour and wears different hats when he inhales an enemy, but not in Dreamland. And the Fun Pack had a bold, slightly 3D aesthetic that was just jettisoned in Dreamland. And as cool as the animal friends are, the enemy helpers work much better than Gooey. I personally prefer the bright saturated colours of the Fun Pack too. I think that suits the Kirby world much better, although the faded crayon look is certainly interesting. Having said that, I'm not really a fan of the split-up minigame style of the Fun Pack. It's just confusing and, I don't know, kind of messy. Dreamland 3 has a nice straightforward map screen, although when it comes down to it, the map progression in the NES games is better than either of them, so whatever. Both games are lots of fun, and if you're a true Kirby fan, you'll want both of them. Although neither of them reach the creativity of any of the Mario games. They're both available on Virtual Console, so get downloading and make up your own mind. And that, as they say, is that. A big thanks to everyone who suggested extra games for me to play after completing the series in the middle of 2012. I genuinely hope you have enjoyed the year of retro gaming, and if you get withdrawals, you can relive the entire series again by checking out the complete playlist on YouTube. There's over 10 hours or something ridiculous on there. Also, Disney fans, don't forget that my new blog is called The Year of Disney Project. Check it out. Thank you again for watching, everyone, and peace out.